I have before me two fantastic gaming laptops that have great performance and excellent build quality, but they both have very unique features. This is the Asus ROG Flow X13 versus the Razer Blade 14. Now, first and foremost, let's check out the build quality and usability, and then we'll get into the performance benchmarks of these two laptops. Now, when I close down the laptops, you can see that the X13 is a little bit thinner than the Razer Blade, and due to its magnesium alloy chassis versus the aluminum chassis on the Razer Blade, it's a bit lighter as well. So if you're looking for a more on-the-go friendly laptop, I would lean you towards the X13. However, it's still great build quality with that magnesium alloy chassis. Now, turning the laptops over, I think that the Razer Blade has a much stronger assembly. It's simpler, cleaner. I love the edges. The side panels and the bottom cover align very nicely, and it makes for just a very nice, strong, minimalist design. Great assembly, great build quality. I think that the X13 is still good as well. Just has a little bit of extra going on here with the way that the side panels fit into the bottom cover. There's a little bit of a catchy edge. It's not sharp by any means, but it's just more noticeable. But this is more discreet in the design. Now, I did wipe this laptop right before I began the review, and as you can already see, it's like fingerprints galore versus the X13, which does have some fingerprints, but they are much more hidden in the matte finish of the laptop. Now, they both kind of have a matte finish, but this one is far more able to conceal fingerprints than the Razer Blade. I mean, I'm just gonna get this thing all worked up really quickly. Oh yeah, get those fingerprints. It's really bad. All right, let's go ahead and check out the ports real quick. Looking at the left side panel, we have our ROG XG mobile port, which you can hook in a full dedicated GPU that Asus sells separately, I might add. But then there's a hidden USB-C port there. Even if you don't have the XG mobile, you can still access that. Micro SD card reader, HDMI, and a headphone jack versus the power adapter, USB Type-A, USB-C, and a headphone jack on the Razer Blade 14. Now flip them over, you have a Kensington lock, HDMI, USB Type-A, and a USB-C on the Blade versus the USB Type-C and USB Type-A on the X13, as well as your power button. The power button's on the inside of the Razer Blade. Now, punch for punch so far, if you're watching this video and you want to know my thoughts on which one I like better, I lean towards the X13. Just thinner, lighter, on-the-go friendly, a little bit more flexible. Speaking of the flexibility, this is also a 2-in-1 laptop. So you can go ahead, pop it open, and access the 2-in-1 feature. And it does not come with a pen, but you can use a pen. You can use Asus Pen 2.0. So while in the 2-in-1 mode and in the regular laptop mode, you can go ahead and grab the Asus Pen, grab your brush tool, and you can see as I draw lightly on the artwork here. In Photoshop, it has a nice light stroke. And as I add pressure, it thickens up the stroke. So the pen touch sensitivity inside of Photoshop is excellent. So that's a huge feature above the Razer Blade that you can go ahead and use this laptop for digital art, photography, or graphic design. And it's actually slightly cheaper. It's about $200 cheaper of a laptop comparatively. So after recording this video, $24.99 for the X13 versus $26.99 for the Razer Blade. And keep in mind that the X13 has 32 gigs of RAM, but it's soldered to the motherboard, where the Razer Blade has 16 gigs of RAM, except that is swappable. So for the upgrade path, you cannot upgrade the RAM on the X13. However, you can upgrade both RAM sticks on the Razer Blade. Now, both laptops have access to one M.2 slot, so you can upgrade that to a bigger drive if you so wish. But keep in mind that the X13 has a micro SD card reader, so you can expand your storage anytime you want by just sliding in a micro SD card, whether it be 512 gigs or 1 terabyte, and quickly expand your storage on the go. Really love that feature. Now, like I said, the pricing is a little bit better on the X13, but if you're curious about the exact live pricing and availability, you can head down in the description below and click those links. If you do make a purchase, I'll get a small commission, but at no extra cost to you. But of course, that's what keeps this channel alive and the helpful content coming your way. Now, looking at the interior of the laptops, you can see that this laptop, the Razer Blade, only opens to about 45 degrees, where of course the X13 can open all the way into tablet mode. So that's a nice little perk there. Now, the next thing is they both have webcams along the top bezel. Here's a quick sample so you can see what they look and sound like. This is the webcam on the Asus ROG Flow X13 from 2023, and a little sample of the audio for you as well.
this is the webcam on the Razer Blade 14 2023, and a little sample of the audio for you as well.
Now, regarding the keyboard and trackpad, I definitely lean towards preferring the trackpad on the Razer Blade. It's a bit bigger. I love the large glass trackpad, secure very nicely to the chassis, and just the dampen click is so satisfying, so smooth. It's very, very nice. However, the trackpad on the X13 is great, and this is an upgraded trackpad in 2023 compared to the smaller 2022 trackpad. So a big improvement for the X13 in 2023 was adding this larger trackpad. Both keyboards are great. However, I prefer the keyboard on the X13. Full-size backspace key, full-size shift key, nice big enter key. Feels like a more normal standard keyboard that I'm used to. I tended to miss the backspace a little bit and hit the plus button because it was a little bit smaller backspace key. The enter key is a little bit small, and even the shift key is a little bit smaller on the Razer Blade. So I just prefer the X13's keyboard setup overall. Here's a quick sample of me using both the keyboards and trackpads so you can hear what they sound like. And of course, the audio experience, I'll have to go for the Razer Blade. The upward-facing speakers are fantastic. That THX audio experience is great. Here's a quick sample so you can hear them both. Now let's talk about the displays. They both have really good displays. Great brightness, solid color gamut range, and so really it just goes down to your preference. We have a matte display on the Razer Blade, a glossy display on the ROG Flow X13, and so just really it's up to you. I'm putting those specs on the screen now so you can see what we have for each of the laptops. And I would say you definitely get a brighter screen from the Razer Blade. So if you're somebody who works outside a lot or in really bright rooms, that may be an advantage to you. All right, now let's talk battery life. This is an area where the X13 definitely wins out. We have a 68 watt hour battery from the Razer Blade and a 75 watt hour battery from the X13. Now, being that we can access the iGPU mode from the Asus Armory crate, that's super helpful in getting better battery life. I'm able to turn off the dedicated GPU and only use the Ryzen 9 7940HS processor that I love from Ryzen for great battery life. So as you can see the battery life results coming up on the screen, definitely better battery life coming from the X13. For both laptops, I was able to set them to 20% screen brightness, Windows battery saver mode. The panel does 60 Hz on the refresh rate. However, I'm able to go iGPU mode on the X13. I'm not able to get that much control on the Razer Blade. Therefore, part of the reason I'm getting not as great of battery life out of the Razer Blade. Now, as we go into the benchmarks, remember that we have 16 gigs in the Razer Blade and 32 gigs soldered to the motherboard inside of the X13. So I'll talk through any of the discrepancies that might create during this review, but I always review laptops stock as they come from the factory. So just keep that in mind. Now, going ahead and looking at single core and multi-core from Geekbench, you can see the X13 has single core advantage and multi-core advantage over the Razer Blade. So definitely it's a little bit more optimized. Now, as we go for Cinebench R23, single core and multi-core, we tie it up a little bit for single core, but then for multi-core, you can see still a bit of an advantage out of the X13. Let's get into some real world benchmarks where we can see what these laptops are actually capable of in some creator apps. Looking at Photoshop, we can see we score a 968 for the Razer Blade and then a 1133 for the X13. Now, if we go ahead and upgrade the Razer Blade to 32 gigs of RAM, I'm guessing we would see in the 1000s to 1100s as well for the Razer Blade. So again, that's that discrepancy of RAM, but don't worry, it is upgradable. Next on the list is going to be After Effects. You can see we have a 868 from the Razer Blade and a 967 from the X13. Now keep in mind, After Effects is not as affected by RAM upgrades as Photoshop is. Photoshop really loves RAM. After Effects does like RAM, but not to the extent that Photoshop does. So if you were to upgrade the RAM, you'd probably get into the low 900s for After Effects out of the Razer Blade. So still, the better performer is going to be the X13. Now moving on to Blender Classroom, this is where the Razer Blade 14 definitely was a show off. 1071 versus the X13 at 819. So big advantage of Blender. If you're a big Blender user, the Razer Blade is going to be the better performer. Moving on to Autodesk 3ds Max, Autodesk Maya, and PTC Creo, we saw that the Razer Blade had a better optimized performance for these graphics intensive programs. The X13 was no slouch, but it definitely wasn't as good as the Razer Blade. Now for SolidWorks, we saw the X13 and the Razer Blade in very similar positions. The Razer Blade definitely has an advantage for SolidWorks, but keep in mind that neither of these laptops are gung-ho SolidWorks laptops. For Ryzen, you're going to want to look at something like the Ryzen RX 6700S or 6800S. From NVIDIA, you're going to want to look at like the RTX A2000, A3000, or A5000. Those are going to be some of the best recommended GPUs for SolidWorks. Now moving on to drop frames, we saw pretty solid results out of the Razer Blade 14. Now those same tests from the X13, 122 from 6K B-RAW, 1,548 from 6K red footage. So a little bit of an advantage for the video editing playback for the Razer Blade. Now moving on down the line to the 4K export time, we take a 9-minute 4K clip, put it into Premiere Pro, and export that out at full quality 4K YouTube settings. The Razer Blade had a 2-minute and 45-second export time, whereas the X13, 2 minutes and 37 seconds. So really neck and neck for 4K. Now let's take a look at 6K. The Razer Blade, 17 minutes and 31 seconds versus the X13 at 19 minutes and 33 seconds. So Razer Blade is going to be the better contender for 3D modeling and for video editing, as we can tell. Now moving on to DaVinci Resolve, it does not matter which laptop you use, they are neck and neck on that program. DaVinci Resolve tends to have a little bit slower export times than Premiere Pro, but they're both in the mid 5-minute range for the export time. Punch for punch, I would lean towards the X13 for my use. I love the flexibility, the thin and lightness. I do like the trackpad on the Razer Blade. It's really, really nice. However, for $200 less, I get more RAM, and I get a touch screen, and I get a great thin and light on-the-go laptop. However, the premium aspect of the Razer Blade is really unbeatable in the Windows market. You have these upward-facing speakers, which create an excellent audio experience, a really clean design aesthetic, great performance from the components, and upgradable RAM. So it really just depends on your use case. Don't forget, links in the description if you're ready to make a purchase, or click or tap the screen here for more videos to help with your buying decision. I'll see you in the next one.